Goodfellas shows you a version of Paulie who keeps his distance, barely raises his voice, takes his cut, and lets everyone else do the work. And Henry Hill is just the kid from across the street who wanted in. But the real Paul Vario ran the most profitable crew in the Lucchese family, $25,000 a day. His people hijacked trucks from JFK Airport so often the FBI caught them on wiretaps, bragging they owned it. And for over 20 years, the man wired into every layer of that operation. The collections, the union payrolls, the airport robberies, was a half-Irish associate who could never be made. Goodfellas showed you why Henry needed Paulie. It never showed you why Paulie needed Henry. It starts in 1955 on a block in East New York, Brooklyn. An 11-year-old Henry Hill walked across the street to a dispatch cab stand run by the Vario family. Paul Vario and his associates socialized there, ran numbers, and conducted business in plain sight. Henry was the son of an Irish-American electrician and a Sicilian mother, one of 8 or 9 kids crammed into a working-class apartment. Henry Hill did not stumble into this world by accident. He walked across the street looking for an after-school job and never left. Before he was even a teenager, he was running errands for Vario's front businesses, his storefront shoe shine, his pizzeria, and the cab stand itself. In 1956, at age 13, he served drinks and sandwiches at a card game where he first met Jimmy Burke. Burke was already a notorious hijacker tied to the Lucchese family. And according to Henry, Burke tipped like nobody he had ever seen, with $20 bills flying around like napkins. Henry was hooked. But the moment that really locked him in came the following year. Vito Tutti Vario, Paul's brother, along with Lenny Vario, one of the younger members of the family, handed Henry a bricklayer's union card. Henry was placed on a building contractor's payroll as a no-show employee, collecting $190 a week. He did not get to keep all of it. A portion went straight back to the Varios. In exchange for that arrangement, Henry used his access to construction sites to collect policy bets and loan shark payments for the crew. He was a teenager collecting gambling debts on job sites for a Lucchese capo regime. He was plugged into how the crew actually made money. I think this is the single most important detail in Henry Hill's entire story, and the movie breezes right past it because there is nothing cinematic about payroll structures. Once that setup was in place, Henry dropped out of school entirely and began working exclusively for the Vario operation. But earning was only part of it. Henry also proved himself through silence. His first taste of real criminal work came when a rival company, the Rebel Cab Company, opened around the corner from Vario's cab stand. The owner was from Alabama, new to New York. Sometime after midnight, Tutti Vario and teenage Henry drove over with a drum of gasoline in the back seat. Henry smashed the cab windows, stuffed them with gasoline-soaked newspapers, and lit them up. That was arson committed by a kid who was barely old enough to drive. And honestly, I think that moment tells you more about Henry's value to the crew than any heist ever would. He did not flinch, did not ask why, just grabbed the gasoline-soaked newspapers and went to work. Then, at 16, Henry and Lenny Vario tried to use a stolen credit card to buy snow tires for Tutti's wife, and police picked Henry up, brought him in for interrogation, and Henry gave them nothing. His name. That was it. Vario's lawyer got him out on bail. After that, both Vario and Burke looked at him differently. A 16-year-old who keeps his mouth shut in an interrogation room is somebody you can use. Even when Henry left, the connection held. Around 17, with an FBI investigation heating up, Henry joined the United States Army and was stationed at Fort Bragg. The movie skips this almost entirely. Those 3 years prove the point, he maintained contact with Vario and Burke the entire time. He did not stop hustling. He sold surplus food out the back door of the kitchen, loan sharked pay advances to fellow soldiers, and sold tax-free cigarettes. He even did 2 months in the military stockade for stealing a sheriff's car and brawling with Marines. The Army could not straighten him out because the crew had already shaped him. I think that is the point Scorsese should have spent more time on. By the time Henry was 17, the mob was the only life anyone had ever taught him. When he came back to New York in 1963, he went straight into arson, intimidation, stolen car rings, and hijacking trucks. By 1965, Henry was close enough to the family that Paul Vario's son, Paul Jr., came to him when he needed a wingman for a double date at one of his father's associates' restaurants. That date is how Henry met Karen Friedman, the woman he would marry. The film changes this detail, having Tommy set up the date instead. But in real life, it was Paulie's own son who brought Henry along, which tells you something about how close Henry had gotten to the family itself, not the crew on the street. Now, to understand what that kind of money actually looked like on the ground, you have to understand how Vario's crew operated. He ran his business out of an old junkyard on Avenue D in Canarsie and a German bar on Flatlands Avenue. From those spots, he oversaw hijackings, bookmaking, fencing stolen property, and loan sharking operations that stretched across Brooklyn, Queens, and out to Long Island. His influence over the cargo haulers union at JFK meant he could threaten labor disruptions to shut down investigations or shake down air freight companies for protection money. Henry himself later said the airport was like the crew's personal Citibank, 2 or 3 trucks a week, sometimes more, and every load meant cash, and Henry was operating right inside that machine. Close to Vario personally, tightly connected to Jimmy Burke, involved in hijackings, collections, and no-show payroll structures that stretched across Brooklyn and Queens. So how far did that trust actually go? On the night of April 7th, 1967, Henry Hill and Tommy DeSimone drove to the Air France cargo terminal at JFK International Airport with the largest empty suitcase Henry could find. An Air France cargo supervisor named Robert McMahon had tipped them off that between $400,000 and $700,000 in untraceable American currency was sitting in a cement block strong room, guarded by a single security guard. The crew had spent weeks working the guard. They used an escort to distract him at a motel near the airport, and while the guard was occupied, Henry copied the key to the strong room. On the night of the robbery, Henry and DeSimone walked into the cargo terminal just before midnight, unlocked the door with the duplicate key, loaded 7 linen bags of cash into the suitcase, and walked out. Nobody saw them. Nobody stopped them. The theft was not even discovered until the following Monday, when an armored truck showed up to collect the money. $420,000. At the time, it was the largest cash robbery ever committed at an American airport. Henry and DeSimone paid $120,000 in tribute to Paul Vario and Colombo family capo Sebastian Alway, who considered the airport his territory, and Henry later said something that the movie never captures. He believed the AIR France robbery was the moment that truly endeared him to the Mafia. After that job, nobody questioned whether the half-Irish kid belonged. After the Air France score, Henry kept climbing. In 1969, he opened a restaurant called The Sweet in Queens, which was supposed to be a legitimate business. It lasted about 5 minutes before it became a mob hangout, and it was inside that restaurant in June of 1970 that Jimmy Burke and Tommy DeSimone beat a Gambino family-made man named Billy Batts so badly they thought he was dead, then loaded his body into the trunk of Henry's car. The movie shows this scene almost exactly as it happened. What it does not emphasize is that Henry's restaurant was the location, Henry's car was the vehicle, and Henry was there for all of it. If you ask me, Goodfellas actually does Henry a favor here by making him look like he was just along for the ride. The real Henry provided the car and the location. He was not a bystander. Then came prison. In 1972, Henry and Burke were sentenced to 10 years on an extortion charge from a job in Florida. Henry ended up at the federal penitentiary in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, and so did Paul Vario, who was serving time for tax evasion. And according to Henry, the mob inmates at Lewisburg lived on what was called Mafia Row, eating and drinking better than anyone else in the facility. Henry and Vario were on the same tier, maintaining the same relationship they had on the outside. And when Henry got out in 1978, Vario was the one who arranged a fictitious restaurant job so that Henry could qualify for parole. I believe that single act says more about Henry's value than anything else in this story. Vario committed a federal crime to get this guy back on the street. You do not do that for someone you plan on cutting loose. If you are finding this useful, hit subscribe. I cover stories like this every week. But here's the contradiction Goodfellas never digs into. Henry could never be made. The rules at the time demanded full Italian ancestry. Henry's father was Irish. That meant he would never hold rank, never receive the formal protections of membership, never sit at the table where ultimate decisions were made. And yet Vario kept giving him more access, not less. By the late 1970s, Henry had become something like connective tissue inside the whole operation. When a bookmaker named Martin Krugman heard about millions in untraceable currency sitting in the Lufthansa cargo terminal at JFK, the tip did not go to Vario or Burke directly. It went to Henry first, and Henry brought it to Burke. That chain of trust, from Krugman to Hill to Burke to Vario, is what set the Lufthansa heist in motion. In December of 1978, Burke's crew walked out of the Lufthansa terminal with nearly $6 million in cash and jewelry. It remains one of the largest cash robberies in American history. Henry did not participate in the actual Lufthansa robbery, but the fact that the tip traveled through him tells you where he sat. He was the go-to guy. People called when they had something worth stealing, and he was the guy who knew which people above him to bring it to. And then Henry watched what happened to the people who were involved. In the months after the Lufthansa heist, Burke started eliminating anyone he thought might talk. Bodies started showing up across New York. One participant was shot in his apartment a week after the robbery. Others were discovered frozen in a meat truck or simply disappeared. Henry saw the trail of corpses and understood what it meant. Anyone connected to that money was a liability, and he was connected. I think Vario kept Henry around precisely because a guy who could never be made could move across every part of the operation without the baggage that came with membership. A made man comes with politics, chain of command, territorial obligations. Henry had none of that. He was a free agent with a look-AC crew behind him, and that gave Vario a flexibility that a made soldier could never offer. Now, that is my read on it. Nobody ever got Vario on tape saying, "I need Henry Hill." But look at what happened when Henry flipped. He was arrested on narcotics charges in 1980, realized that both Burke and Vario might kill him for dealing drugs without permission, and decided to cooperate. His testimony as a government witness led to 50 convictions, 50 former associates. You do not get to 50 unless you were sitting in rooms where real decisions happened and you remembered every word. Paul Vario was convicted in 1984 for arranging a fictitious restaurant job to get Henry out of prison on parole. Vario was convicted again in 1985 for extorting payoffs from air cargo companies at JFK Airport. He was sentenced to 10 years and died of respiratory failure in federal prison in Fort Worth, Texas on May 3, 1988. He was 73. Jimmy Burke was convicted of murder and involvement in the Boston College basketball point shaving scandal. He died of lung cancer in prison in 1996. Henry had been collecting information on these guys since he was 11 years old, and Vario handed it to him year after year because he never imagined the kid from across the street would ever use it against him. Goodfellas tells you what Henry got out of the deal: the money, the status, the life he always wanted. What it barely touches is what Paulie got: a kid who showed up at 11 and was still showing up at 36, who could collect debts, move tips to the right people, handle a robbery, take a prison sentence, and keep his mouth shut through all of it, and who never had to be put on the books because he could never be made anyway. That relationship went back almost 25 years. Vario had watched Henry grow up inside his own operation, and I think by the end, Vario could not have cut Henry loose even if he wanted to, because Henry knew too much about everything, which is exactly why the ending hits the way it does. The thing that made Henry valuable for 25 years, the fact that he was everywhere, involved in everything, trusted with all of it, is the same thing that made him lethal when he walked into a federal courthouse and started talking. Vario spent decades building Henry into his operation, and Henry used every bit of it to bury him. If you want to see what else Goodfellas left out about the real Look AC crew, that video is on screen now.